Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're alone, driving through the black heart of the night, miles from the nearest town. The highway stretches endlessly before you, swallowed by a darkness so thick it feels alive. No streetlights to guide you. No other cars to share the road. Just you, the low growl of your engine, and something else. Something watching from the shadows, waiting just beyond the edge of your headlights. Welcome to 10. Scary true trucker horror stories. Real, spine-chilling tales from truckers who've faced the unexplainable, the impossible, on the open road. These aren't just stories. They're warnings, etched into the memories of those who survived. For the next 4 hours, we're diving deep into the terror that lurks on America's highways. So lock your doors, dim the lights, and hold on, tight, because tonight, the road is alive and it's hungry. Before we begin this journey into the abyss, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our legion of thrill seekers. You'll need the company for what's ahead. If you've got a creepy road story of your own, a shadow in your mirrors, a voice on your radio, drop it in the comments below. We're all listening. Now buckle up, keep your eyes on the road, and let's dive into the first story, if you dare. Story 1. The Phantom Hitchhiker of Route 66, America's Mother Road, a legend carved into the heart of the nation. It's a highway of dreams, of freedom, but also of secrets. Secrets that linger in the dust and shadows. For Dave Miller, a 48-year-old trucker from Springfield, Illinois, Route 66 was just another job in the summer of 2018. He'd driven its lonely stretches for years, hauling everything from auto parts to frozen food. But on one fateful night, he met something, or someone, that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Dave had been on the road for 14 hours, hauling a load of car parts from Chicago to Flagstaff, Arizona. The clock on his dash read 2:17 a.m., and the world outside his cab was a void of silence. The desert stretched endlessly around him, the only signs of life the occasional tumbleweed skittering across the road. His CB radio crackled faintly, spitting static into the quiet, a familiar companion on these long hauls. Dave was no stranger to the loneliness of the road. He'd driven through blizzards, sandstorms, and everything in between. But tonight, as he crossed the Arizona-New Mexico border, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the darkness too heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Dave rubbed his eyes, fighting the fog of exhaustion. He'd been living on coffee and willpower, his thermos long empty. The road was a blur of asphalt and faded lines, his headlights barely cutting through the mist that had rolled in without warning. That's when he saw her, a figure on the side of the road, standing motionless under the pale glow of the moon. A woman, her silhouette stark against the desert's emptiness. She wore a tattered white dress, its hem fluttering in a breeze Dave couldn't feel. Her long, dark hair hung limp, swaying slightly, and her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, like a marionette with broken strings. Dave's pulse quickened, his hands tightening on the wheel. Hitchhikers weren't uncommon on Route 66. Lost souls, drifters, or desperate travelers looking for a ride. But this was no ordinary hitchhiker. Her presence felt wrong, like a photograph slightly out of focus. Her eyes glinted in the dark, locking onto his truck with an intensity that made his skin crawl, as if she could see straight into his soul. Every instinct screamed at him to keep driving, to floor the gas and leave her behind in the dust. But Dave was a good man, raised in a small town where you helped those in need, no matter the hour. He couldn't just leave her out here, alone in the desert, could he? He eased his rig to a stop, the tires grinding against the loose dirt of the shoulder. The mist thickened, curling around the truck like ghostly fingers. Dave rolled down his window, the desert chill biting at his face, carrying a faint, sour smell, like damp earth and decay. "Hey, lady," he called, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound calm. "You okay out there? Need a ride somewhere?" The woman didn't answer. She just stood there, her head tilting further, her eyes boring into him with a hunger that made his stomach lurch. Dave's heart hammered in his chest. He noticed now that her dress wasn't just tattered. It was soaked, the dark patches spreading like blood seeping through fabric, glistening in the moonlight. Her bare feet dragged across the ground, leaving no footprints, no trace in the dust. His hand hovered over the gear shift, ready to bolt, but he was frozen, caught in her gaze like a deer in headlights. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing against him like a physical force. She moved closer, her steps silent, her dress swaying as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. Dave's breath caught in his throat as she reached the passenger door, her hand brushing the handle. The metal creaked, and the door swung open on its own, a blast of icy air flooding the cab. The smell hit him full force now. Rotting earth, like an open grave, mixed with something metallic, like old blood. The woman climbed in, her movement slow and deliberate, as if she were savoring the moment. Dave's voice cracked as he stammered, "Where are you headed? I can take you to the next town." She turned to him, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't human, a jagged slash across her face. "Home," she whispered, her voice a rasp, like sandpaper scraping bone, each word dripping with a weight that made Dave's blood run cold. He tore his eyes away, focusing on the road, willing himself to stay calm. The cab felt smaller now, the air thick with that rotting smell, pressing against him like a living thing. He didn't dare look at her again, but he could feel her presence, heavy and oppressive, like a shadow clinging to his soul. Dave drove, his hands shaking, his eyes locked on the road. The mist outside thickened, swirling around the truck, the headlights barely piercing it. The woman sat silently, her head tilted, her eyes fixed on him. He could feel them, burning into the side of his face, unblinking, unrelenting. The CB radio continued to spit static, the garbled voices growing louder, more insistent, as if something was trying to break through. Dave's heart was slamming against his ribs now, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He glanced at the clock. Only 10 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours, like time itself was bending around her. He risked a glance at the passenger seat, unable to stop himself, and she was gone. The seat was empty, the door still locked, the air still heavy with that sickly smell. Dave's relief was short-lived. A loud thud echoed from the trailer behind him, like something heavy slamming against the metal. Then another, and another, rhythmic and deliberate, like footsteps pacing inside. He floored the gas, his rig roaring through the night, the desert blurring past, the thuds growing louder, more insistent. Dave didn't stop until dawn broke over the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and pink. He pulled into a dusty truck stop outside Kingman, Arizona, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold the wheel. He stumbled into the diner, pale and sweating, his eyes wild with fear. The waitress, a kind older woman with deep lines etched into her face, took one look at him and poured him a coffee without a word. When Dave finally found his voice, he spilled his story, his words tumbling out in a rush. The locals listened in silence, their faces grim. They'd heard stories like Dave's before. Tales of the phantom hitchhiker, a woman who appears on Route 66, always at night, always alone. Some say she was a young bride, killed in a hit-and-run in the 1950s, her body left to rot in the desert. Others whisper she's something older, something darker, a spirit bound to the road, luring drivers to share her fate. Dave checked his passenger seat before leaving the truck stop. What he found stopped his heart. A single, muddy handprint pressed into the leather, its fingers unnaturally long, like claws, with jagged marks scratched into the upholstery. Dave sold his rig a month later, trading the open road for a desk job at a shipping company. He swore he'd never drive Route 66 again. Never tempt whatever it was that found him that night. But he says that late at night, when the world is quiet, he can still hear her voice, that rasping whisper echoing in his mind. Home. And, in his dreams, he sees those hollow eyes, watching him from the passenger seat, waiting for him to return to the road. That's just the first mile of our 4-hour journey, and the road ahead is crawling with nightmares. 9 more stories to go, each one darker, each one more unsettling. If you're hooked, smash that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good scare. Let's keep rolling into the abyss. Story 2. The Whispering CB Radio for Truckers. The CB radio is a lifeline, a tether to the outside world when you're alone in the middle of nowhere. It's the voice of other drivers, the chatter that keeps the loneliness at bay. But for Sarah Thompson, a tough-as-nails trucker from Lubbock, Texas, her CB became a gateway to something sinister, something that spoke from beyond the grave. It was November 2020, and Sarah was hauling a load of lumber from Portland to Boise, a run she'd done a dozen times. The forest roads were narrow, twisting through towering pines that seemed to close in around her, their needles brushing the top of her rig. She'd been driving for hours, her eyes heavy, her thermos of coffee long gone. The CB radio was her only company, buzzing with the usual trucker chatter, jokes about greasy diner food, complaints about late deliveries. But around 3 a.m., the air grew heavy, the forest unnaturally quiet, and the radio fell silent. Sarah frowned, tapping the mic, her fingers calloused from years of gripping the wheel. The static cleared, and a voice came through, clear as a bell but weak, like someone gasping for their last breath. Help. Me. It was a man's voice, laced with desperation, each word dripping with pain. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening. She grabbed the mic, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. This is Big Red. Who's this? You okay out there? Where you at? No response. Just more static, thick and buzzing, like a swarm of angry bees. She switched channels, thinking it was a prank or a crossed signal from another driver. But the voice followed her, always on channel 19, always the same plea. Help. Me. Sarah's skin prickled, goosebumps rising under her jacket. She'd driven these roads for years, knew every curve and dip, and she knew no one could transmit that clearly without being close. Very close. But her headlights showed nothing but trees, their branches swaying in a wind she couldn't hear, their shadows dancing like specters in the dark. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. She scanned the road, expecting to see a stranded motorist, a wrecked car, or even a body lying in the ditch. But the forest was empty, the darkness pressing in like a living thing, swallowing her headlights. The voice grew angrier, more desperate, screaming. Now, why won't you help me? The words echoed in the cab, vibrating through the metal, as if the voice was inside the truck with her. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to respond, to calm whoever, or whatever it was. But her throat was dry, her words stuck. Then she saw it, just for a second, a figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by her headlights. It was too tall, its arms too long, its body shrouded in darkness, like a silhouette carved from the night itself. Sarah slammed on the brakes, her rig screeching to a stop, the tires skidding on the damp pavement. She blinked, her eyes straining, and the figure was gone, swallowed by the forest. The CB went silent, the static replaced by an oppressive quiet that made her ears ring, her head pound. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She tried to start her truck, but the engine sputtered, the starter clicking uselessly. The air in the cab grew colder, her breath visible in the dim light, frosting the windshield from the inside. The CB crackled again, and this time, it wasn't a plea. It was laughter, low, guttural, and utterly inhuman, like gravel grinding in a throat that wasn't there. The laughter grew louder, filling the cab, echoing in her skull, as if it was coming from everywhere and nowhere. Sarah sat frozen, her hands trembling as she clutched the mic, her eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting to see that figure again. The laughter grew louder, more menacing, as if whatever was on the other end was toying with her, savoring her fear. The temperature plummeted, frost creeping across the windshield, forming patterns that looked like claw marks. She whispered, a prayer, something she hadn't done since she was a girl, begging for the nightmare to end, for the light of dawn to break through the trees. Then, as suddenly as it started, the radio went dead. The engine roared to life, the headlights flaring brighter, cutting through the darkness. Sarah didn't hesitate. She floored it, the rig lurching forward, the forest blurring past like a nightmare she could outrun. She drove for hours, not stopping, not slowing, until the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She pulled into a truck stop outside Boise, her hands still shaking, her face pale as death. At the truck stop, Sarah spilled her story to a group of old-timers, their faces weathered by years on the road, their eyes dark with unspoken secrets. They listened in silence, nodding slowly, as if they'd heard it all before. One of them, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek and a voice like gravel, spoke up. "You heard the lost driver?" he said. "Back in '98, a trucker went, missing in those woods. His rig was found abandoned, the CB still on, broadcasting nothing but static and laughter. They never found him, but they say he's still out there, calling for help, trying to lure others into the dark." Sarah sold her rig a month later, trading the road for a quiet life. But she swears that sometimes, when she's alone, she can still hear that voice, whispering through the static. "Help. Me." 8 more stories to go, and the darkness is only getting thicker. If you're still with me, drop a comment. Have you ever heard something on the radio that chilled you to the bone? Let's keep driving, deeper into the night. Story 3. The red eyes in the fog is a trucker's worst enemy. It blinds you, hides the curves of the road, and turns every shadow into a threat. For Marcus Reed, a burly trucker from Cleveland, Ohio, a foggy night in 2019 became a descent into a nightmare that still haunts his every waking moment, a night where he came face to face with something that wasn't human. Marcus was hauling steel pipes from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg, a route he'd driven so many times he could do it blindfolded. Or so he thought. It was late October, and the night was cold, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Around midnight, a fog rolled in, fast and thick, like a living thing creeping across the landscape. It swallowed the road, turning his world into a wall of white, his headlights reflecting back in a blinding glare. His GPS glitched, the screen flickering with nonsense coordinates, looping between locations that didn't exist. His CB radio was useless, spitting out bursts of static that sounded almost like voices, faint and garbled. Marcus kept his speed steady, his eyes straining to make out the road's edges. The fog seemed to pulse, alive with shapes that flickered, at the corners of his vision, vanishing when he looked too long. He told himself it was just his imagination, the exhaustion of a 12-hour shift playing tricks. He'd been on the road for days, living on energy drinks and diner burgers, his body aching, his mind foggy. But then, he saw them. 2 glowing red eyes, burning through the mist like beacons from another world. Marcus's heart lurched, his breath catching in his throat. They weren't headlights, not reflectors, not even animal eyes. They were too big, too bright, and they stared at him with an intelligence that made his skin crawl, as if they could see into his very soul. He slowed his rig, thinking maybe it was a deer or a bear caught in the fog, its eyes reflecting his lights. But the eyes didn't move. They just hung there, watching, unblinking, as he crept closer, the fog swirling around them like a shroud. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to turn back, to find another route, but the road was narrow, flanked by steep ditches and dense woods. There was no turning around, no escape. He gripped the wheel, his palms slick with sweat, his heart pounding like a drum. The eyes grew larger, brighter, now level with his windshield, as if whatever they belonged to was standing upright, impossibly tall. Then he heard it, a sound, like claws scraping against metal, coming from the trailer behind him, slow and deliberate, like something was dragging itself across the steel. Marcus checked his mirrors, but the fog was too thick, swallowing everything beyond a few feet. The scraping grew louder, faster, like something was trying to claw its way inside the trailer, its movements frantic, hungry. He tried the CB, his voice shaking as he called out, "Anyone out there? This is Iron Horse, I need help." But the radio only hissed back, the static twisting into a guttural snarl that made his blood run cold. The fog parted for a split second, and Marcus saw it. A massive, hulking shape, shrouded in mist. Its body indistinct but wrong, too large to be any animal he knew. Its limbs were twisted, elongated, moving in ways that defied nature, like a spider scuttling across a web. Those red eyes burned into him, filled with malice, with hunger. Marcus slammed on the gas, his rig lurching forward, the tires screaming against the pavement, the engine roaring as he pushed it to its limits. For miles, those eyes followed him, keeping pace with his truck, never blinking, never fading. The scraping continued, relentless, like the thing was clinging to his trailer, its claws digging into the metal. Marcus prayed, something he hadn't done since he was a boy, his voice trembling as he begged for the fog to lift, for the nightmare to end. The road seemed endless, each mile stretching into eternity, the fog closing in tighter, the eyes always there, watching from the darkness. Hours passed, each one a lifetime, until finally, the fog began to thin, the first rays of dawn breaking through the haze. The eyes vanished, the scraping stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Marcus didn't stop until he reached a rest stop, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the wheel. He climbed out, his legs weak, and checked his trailer. What he found made his heart stop. Deep, jagged claw marks etched into the steel, some so deep they nearly punched through the metal, others forming patterns that looked almost like symbols, ancient and unsettling. Marcus reported the incident to the local police, but they dismissed it as vandalism, suggesting kids with tools or a prank gone too far. But the truckers at the rest stop knew better. They gathered around, their faces grim, and told him about the beast of the fog, a creature said to stalk foggy highways, hunting those who dare to drive through its domain. Some say it's a demon, summoned by an old curse. Others believe it's a creature twisted by something unnatural. A predator. That feeds on fear. Marcus took a picture of the claw marks, but when he looked at it later, the symbols were gone. The marks just scratches. He doesn't drive at night anymore, and he says those red eyes still haunt his dreams, watching him from the darkness, waiting for him to return. We're only 3 stories in, and the road is already thick with terror. If you're feeling the chills, drop a comment below. Have you ever seen something in the fog that didn't belong? 7 more stories to go. Let's keep moving, deeper into the night. Story 4. The Ghostly Convoy. There's strength in numbers, or so truckers believe. A convoy means companionship, safety, a shared journey through the lonely miles of the open road. But for Juan Alvarez, a 35-year-old trucker from Reno, a convoy in 2017 became a nightmare. A ride with trucks that didn't belong to this world, that carried ghosts instead of cargo. Juan was part of a 5-truck convoy, hauling electronics, from Reno to Las Vegas, a run that promised good pay and an easy route. The desert night was clear. the stars a dazzling canopy above the endless sand, their light casting faint shadows across the road. The CB was alive with the usual trucker banter, jokes about bad coffee, complaints about dispatchers, stories of close calls on icy roads. Juan felt good, safe in the company of his fellow drivers, their headlights a comforting chain behind him. But around midnight, the air changed, growing heavy, charged, like the calm before a storm. The chatter stopped abruptly, the CB falling silent, as if someone had flipped a switch. Juan frowned, tapping the mic, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Hey, y'all still there? Breaker, this is Coyote." No response, just a low, buzzing static that made his ears ache, his head throb. He glanced in his mirrors, expecting to see the familiar headlights of the other trucks, their modern rigs gleaming in the starlight. But what he saw made his blood run cold. These weren't the sleek Peterbilts and Kenworths he'd started with. These were ancient, boxy trucks, their paint peeling, their chrome tarnished, their engines roaring with a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through Juan's bones, shaking the cab. The trucks looked like they belonged in a junkyard, not on the road, their bodies scarred with rust and dents, their headlights casting a sickly yellow glow. Juan's heart raced, his hands tightening on the wheel. He tried the CB again, switching channels, his voice shaking. "Anyone out there? This ain't funny." But all he got was a low, eerie hum, like a distant choir singing in a language he couldn't understand, mournful and haunting. He kept driving, telling himself it was a mirage, a trick of the desert's heat and his tired eyes. But then he saw the drivers. In the cab of the truck behind him, a figure sat, its face pale and hollow, its eyes sunken pits that glowed faintly in the dark, like embers in a dying fire. It was staring right at Juan, unblinking, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its mouth moving as if whispering words he couldn't hear. Juan's hands shook as he gripped the wheel, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He floored it, the engine roaring, trying to outrun the strange convoy. But no matter how fast he went, the old trucks kept pace, their headlights never fading, their engines growling like beasts. The CB hummed louder, the hum turning into whispers. Words he couldn't make out, but they filled him with a primal dread, like a warning from the grave. "Join us. Stay." The words were faint, but they cut through the static, clear and cold, like a blade against his skin. For hours, the ghostly convoy followed him, their rusted frames gleaming in the starlight, their headlights casting long, distorted shadows across the desert. Juan's fuel gauge was dropping fast, the needle dipping into the red, but he didn't dare stop, didn't dare pull over. The whispers grew clearer, more insistent, forming sentences that made his heart pound. "You can't leave. You belong here." His dashboard lights flickered, the air in the cab growing colder, his breath visible in the dim glow, frosting the windows. Juan prayed, his voice trembling, his hands clutching the wheel like a lifeline. He begged for the night to end, for the stars to fade, for the dawn to break. The whispers grew louder, more demanding, filling the cab, echoing in his skull. He could feel their presence, heavy and oppressive, like a weight pressing on his chest. The trucks seemed closer now, their rusted grills almost touching his trailer, their engines roaring louder, shaking the road. Finally, just before dawn, the whispers stopped, the air lightening as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. The old trucks vanished, their headlights fading, their engines falling silent. The modern convoy reappeared in Juan's mirrors, their drivers chatting on the CB as if nothing had happened, their voices cheerful and oblivious. Juan's hands were still shaking when he pulled into a truck stop, his fuel tank nearly empty, his body drenched in sweat. When Juan told the other drivers what he'd seen, they looked at him like he was crazy, their eyes narrowing, their laughter nervous. According to them, the convoy had been normal all night, the CB never silent, their headlights never changing. Juan checked his dash cam. hoping for proof. But the footage was corrupted. Nothing but static and fleeting shadows, shapes that flickered, too fast to make out. An old trucker, his face lined with years of hard miles, pulled Juan aside, his voice low. "You saw the ghost convoy," he whispered. "Lost drivers, doomed to roam the desert forever, looking for others to join them. You're lucky they let you go." Juan never drove that route again, and he keeps a rosary on his dashboard now, a silent prayer against the darkness. We're halfway through our journey, and the nightmares are piling up like storm clouds. If you're loving these stories, hit that subscribe button and join our community of horror fans. 6 more tales to go. Let's see how much you can handle. Story 5. The Woman in the Rearview Mirror. Your mirrors are your eyes on the road, showing you what's behind, keeping you safe from the dangers you can't see. But for Emily Carter, a rookie trucker from Wichita, Kansas, her rearview mirror became a window into a nightmare, a vision that would change her forever. It was March 2021, and Emily was new to trucking, just 3 months into a job she'd taken to prove herself. She was hauling a load of produce, apples and potatoes, from Kansas City to Denver, battling a storm that had turned the highway into a river of mud. The rain was relentless, pounding the cab, the wind howling like a pack of wolves, shaking the truck with every gust. Emily was tired, her eyes burning from hours of staring into the storm, but she was determined to make her delivery on time, to show her boss she could handle the road. It was around 1 a.m., the road empty, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Emily glanced in her side mirror, checking her trailer, when she saw her. A woman, standing in the middle of the road behind her rig, illuminated by the red glow of her taillights. She wore a soaked white dress, the fabric clinging to her gaunt frame, her hair plastered to her face like wet ropes. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, locked onto Emily's with an intensity that made her stomach lurch, her heart skip a beat. Emily slammed on the brakes, her rig skidding on the wet pavement, the trailer fishtailing slightly. She thought she'd almost hit someone, her mind racing with guilt and fear. She checked the mirror again, expecting to see the woman lying in the road, injured or worse. But the road was empty, the rain washing away any trace, the taillights casting their red glow on nothing but asphalt. Emily's hands trembled, her breath shallow. She told herself it was a trick of the light, a reflection in the storm. Her tired mind playing games. She checked her mirrors again, her heart pounding, and there she was. The woman, closer now, her face pressed against the glass of the mirror, her eyes boring into Emily's soul. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, her teeth jagged and uneven, her face twisted into something almost inhuman. Emily screamed, swerving the truck, the tires screeching against the pavement, the rig lurching dangerously. The woman vanished. But now Emily heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the roof of the cab. Tap, tap, tap. Like footsteps, deliberate and slow, as if someone or something was walking across the top of her rig. Emily's hands shook as she gripped the wheel, her eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting to see the woman again. The tapping continued, relentless, following her for miles, each tap a reminder of the presence above her. She tried the CB, her voice trembling as she called out, "Anyone out there? This is Fresh Start. I need help." But the radio was dead, the static thick and buzzing, laced with whispers. Words she couldn't understand, but they filled her with dread, like a warning from the grave. Emily prayed, her voice shaking, begging for the storm to end, for the dawn to come. The tapping grew louder, faster, like the thing on the roof was growing impatient, its movements frantic, hungry. She could feel its presence, heavy and malevolent, pressing against her, filling the cab with a chill that seeped into her bones. The air grew colder, the windows fogging with her breath, the dashboard lights flickering as if struggling against the darkness. Every time she checked her mirrors, the woman was there, her face more distorted, more wrong. Her eyes black voids, her mouth a gaping maw that seemed to swallow the light. Hours passed, each one an eternity, the storm raging on, the woman's face never leaving the mirrors, the tapping never stopping. Emily's hands were numb, her body shaking, her mind teetering on the edge of panic. Finally, the rain began to slow, the clouds parting to reveal a faint gray dawn. The tapping stopped, the woman's face vanished, and the air felt lighter, as if the presence had retreated. Emily pulled into a rest stop, sobbing and shaking, her hands trembling so badly she could barely open the door. When Emily checked the roof, she found footprints, small, bare, glistening in the early morning, light, as if someone had been up there moments ago. They led to the edge of the roof and stopped, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. She quit trucking a week later, unable to shake the image of that face in her mirror, those black eyes staring into her soul. At the rest stop, she overheard locals talking about a woman who drowned in a flood years ago, her car swept off, that very highway in a storm just like this one. They say her spirit still wanders the road, appearing in the mirrors of those who drive alone, searching for someone to join her in the dark, to share her endless torment. We're halfway through, and the road is crawling with shadows, each one darker than the last. If you're still here, you're braver than most. Drop a comment. Have you ever seen something in your mirrors that didn't belong? 5 more stories to go. Let's keep going, deeper into the nightmare. Story 6. The Haunted Rest. Stop rest stops are a trucker's haven, a place to stretch your legs, grab a coffee, and shake off the road's loneliness. But for Michael Hayes, a 42-year-old trucker from Boise, Idaho, a rest stop off I-84 became a place of unspeakable horror, a nightmare that would follow him long after he left its cursed ground. It was September 2016, and Michael was hauling cattle across Idaho, a grueling run that had him on the road for days, his body aching, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. He'd been driving for hours, the road a blur of asphalt and yellow lines, his thermos empty, his energy fading. He spotted a rest stop off I-84, a small run-down place with a single flickering light and a faded sign that read, "Rest Area. 2 miles." It looked deserted, the parking lot empty, the air unnaturally still, but Michael needed a break. He pulled in, the gravel crunching under his tires, the silence of the night pressing in around him like a living thing. Michael grabbed his flashlight and a bottle of water, his boots crunching on the gravel as he headed for the restroom. The building was old, its paint peeling, its windows dark and grimy, covered in years of dust and neglect. The air felt heavy, charged, like the calm before a storm, carrying a faint smell of mildew and something worse, something like decay, sharp and sour. He pushed open the restroom door, the hinges groaning, and a wave of cold air hit him, chilling him to the bone. Michael's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rusted sinks and chipped tiles, the air thick with the smell of rot. Then he heard it, a low, guttural moan, like someone in agony, coming from the far end of the restroom where the shadows were thickest, pooling like ink. He froze, his heart pounding, his breath catching in his throat. "Anyone in there?" he called, his voice echoing off the walls, sounding small and fragile in the silence. No answer. Just another moan, louder now, raw and desperate, like a cry from someone or something trapped in pain. Against his better judgment, Michael stepped inside, his flashlight shaking in his hand, the beam trembling across the walls. The moan came again, and now he saw it. A figure in the corner, hunched over, its back to him, its body shrouded in shadow. It was human-shaped but wrong, its limbs too long, its movements jerky, like a puppet with cut strings, twitching unnaturally. Michael's breath caught, his stomach churning. He called out again, "Hey, you okay? Need help?" The figure didn't respond. It just turned, slowly, its face hidden in shadow, its head tilting at an angle that made his skin crawl. Then it screamed, a sound so raw, so inhuman, it felt like a knife in Michael's chest, piercing his heart. The scream echoed, bouncing off the walls, growing louder, more piercing, shaking the very air. Michael stumbled back, his flashlight dropping to the floor, the beam spinning wildly, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The figure lunged forward, its movements impossibly fast, its hands reaching out, the nails scraping against the tiles. Michael ran, his boots pounding the pavement, his heart hammering as he sprinted to his truck, the scream chasing him, echoing in his ears. He locked himself in the cab, his breath ragged, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the keys. The footsteps circled his truck, slow and deliberate, like whatever was out there was toying with him, savoring his fear. The CB radio crackled to life, but no one was on the line, just static and a faint whispered voice, cold and menacing. Stay. Stay with us. Michael sat there, frozen, clutching a tire iron, listening as the footsteps moved closer, then stopped, the air growing colder, the windows fogging with his breath, the frost forming patterns like claw marks. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat in his cab, his eyes locked on the door, his hands gripping the tire iron, waiting for dawn. When the first light broke over the horizon, the footsteps stopped. The air lightened, and the presence seemed to retreat, like a predator slipping back into the shadows. He drove off, his hands still shaking, his heart still racing, never looking back. At the next truck stop, he told his story to a group of drivers, their faces grim, their eyes dark with recognition. An old-timer, his hands scarred from years of hard work, nodded slowly. "That's the haunted rest stop," he said. "People have been disappearing there since the 70s, their trucks found empty, their CBs still on, broadcasting nothing but screams. You're lucky you got out alive. 4 more stories to go, and the terror's only getting thicker, the shadows darker. If you're still here, you're tougher than most. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who can handle the scares. Let's keep rolling, deeper into the nightmare." Story 7. The Shadow in the Trailer. Your trailer is your responsibility. Check it, secure it, trust it's safe. It's just cargo, just boxes or crates, nothing more. But for Tony Delgado, a 39-year-old trucker from Los Angeles, his trailer held something far worse than cargo, a presence that followed him into the dark, that clung to him like a curse. It was August 2022, and Tony was hauling electronics, TVs, laptops, and speakers, from a EE warehouse in Los Angeles to a distribution center in Salt Lake City. He'd checked his trailer before leaving, walking its length, running his hands over the straps, ensuring the cargo was secure. Everything was in order, the locks tight, the manifest clear, the doors sealed. Tony was meticulous, a habit born, from years on the road, where a single mistake could cost you your job, or worse. But as he drove through the Mojave Desert, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood and fire, he started hearing noises. Thumps, bangs, like something heavy shifting inside the trailer. Tony frowned, adjusting his mirrors, his eyes scanning the road behind him. He'd secured the load himself, checked every strap, every box. There was no way anything could have come loose, not with his years of experience. The thumps grew louder, more rhythmic, like footsteps pacing inside the trailer, deliberate and heavy, as if someone, or something, was walking back and forth. He tried to ignore it, cranking up the radio, letting classic rock drown out the noise. But the thumps cut through, insistent and unnatural, vibrating through the cab. Tony's heart began to race, his palms sweating as he gripped the wheel. The desert stretched endlessly around him. The road a lonely ribbon of asphalt under a starless sky, the air heavy with heat. He told himself it was just the road, just the bumps and dips playing tricks. But the noises grew louder, more aggressive, like something was trying to get out. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pulled over at a rest stop, the only light a flickering sodium lamp casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement. Tony grabbed his flashlight, his hands trembling, and approached the trailer. The locks were still secure, the doors untouched, the seals intact. He hesitated, his hand on the handle, every instinct screaming at him to get back in the cab and drive, to leave whatever was inside to the desert. But he had to know, had to be sure. He swung the door open, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating rows of neatly stacked boxes, strapped down tight. Everything was in place, just as he'd left it. But then he saw it. A shadow, darting across the back of the trailer, fleeting and formless, like smoke given shape. It wasn't a person, not an animal, but a shape. Human-like but wrong, its edges blurry, its movements too fast, too fluid, like it wasn't bound by the laws of physics. It moved with purpose, darting out of sight before Tony could focus on, it leaving only a chill in the air and a faint sour smell, like rotting wood. He slammed the door shut, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the pavement. He stumbled back to the cab, locking himself in, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Tony sat there, his heart pounding, his eyes locked on the mirrors, expecting to see the shadow again. The thump started again, louder now, more insistent, like something was trying to break through the trailer's walls. He drove off, the rig lurching forward, the noises following him, relentless, echoing through the desert night. Sometimes he swore he heard whispers, words he couldn't make out, but they sent chills down his spine, filling him with a dread he couldn't shake. The air in the cab grew colder, the dashboard lights flickering, the shadows in the mirrors shifting, as if the thing was still there, watching him. For hours Tony drove, the noises never stopping, the whispers growing clearer, forming words that made his blood run cold. "You can't leave. You're mine." His hands trembled, his eyes darting to the mirrors, half expecting to see that shadow again, its form filling the glass. The desert seemed to close in around him, the stars above cold and distant, the road endless. He prayed, his voice shaking, begging for the dawn, for the light to drive the thing away. When Tony reached the warehouse in Salt Lake City, he was a wreck, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. He watched as the workers unloaded the trailer, expecting them to find something, anything, to explain the noises, the shadow. But the cargo was untouched, the trailer pristine, the boxes exactly as he'd left them. As he turned to leave, he glanced back and saw it, the shadow standing at the far end of the trailer watching him. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared with eyes that weren't there, its form flickering like static, its presence heavy and oppressive. Tony quit his job that week, trading the road for a quiet life in the suburbs. He couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was still with him, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to return. Other truckers say they've seen it too. A shadow that hitches a ride in their trailers appearing in the dark, watching, waiting. Some say it's a spirit, the ghost of a driver who died on the road. Others believe it's a curse, something ancient that feeds on the loneliness of the highway, claiming those who drive alone. Tony keeps a light on at night now, and he says he can still hear the thumps, faint and distant, like footsteps in the dark. 3 more stories, and the darkness is closing in, the shadows growing longer. If you're enjoying these tales, drop a comment. Has something ever followed you home from the road? Let's keep going, deeper into the terror. Story 8. The Vanishing Town. Some places aren't meant to be found. Ghost towns that exist only in whispers, appearing and vanishing like mirages in the desert. For Lisa Monroe, a 43-year-old trucker from Denver, Colorado, a wrong turn in 2019 led her to a town that shouldn't exist, a place that held her in its grip and refused to let go. Lisa was hauling grain from Cheyenne to Casper, a run she'd done 100 times, her rig loaded with sacks of wheat bound for a processing plant. It was late August, and a dust storm was brewing, the air thick with grit that stung her eyes and coated her windshield. Her GPS told her to take a left turn onto a narrow, unpaved road she didn't recognize, a route that wasn't on her paper map. She hesitated, checking the map, but the signal was weak, the screen glitching, and the storm was getting worse, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. Against her better judgment, she turned, the rig bouncing on the uneven road, the dust swirling around her like a living thing. The road stretched on, mile after mile, leading to a small town, a cluster of dilapidated buildings huddled together, like forgotten relics, their windows dark, their walls crumbling. A rusted sign read, "Eden's Hollow." Its letters faded, barely legible, as if the town itself was fading from existence. The place looked abandoned. Houses with broken windows, their curtains fluttering like ghosts. A gas station with pumps, frozen in time, their hoses cracked and dry. A diner with a neon sign that flickered weakly, casting a sickly green glow. Lisa's GPS insisted she was on the right route, but every fiber of her being screamed that something was wrong, that this place wasn't on any map, wasn't meant to be found. She drove slowly through the town, her eyes scanning for any sign of life. A person, a dog, even a stray cat. But the streets were empty, the air unnaturally still, the dust storm seeming to pause around the town's edges, as if held at bay by some unseen force. Then she saw them, figures in the windows, standing motionless, their faces hidden in shadow, their silhouettes stark against the dim light. They weren't moving, just watching, their presence heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing on her chest. Lisa's heart raced, her hands tightening on the wheel, her breath shallow. She tried her phone, but there was no signal. The screen, showing nothing but static. Her CB was dead, spitting out a low buzz that sounded almost like voices, faint and garbled, speaking in a language she didn't know. She floored it, desperate to get out of Eden's Hollow, the rig lurching forward, the tires kicking up clouds of dust. But the road seemed to loop, bringing her back to the same rusted sign again and again, the town refusing to let her go, or hours. Lisa drove in circles, the town's buildings looming closer each time, the figures in the windows growing more defined, their hands reaching out, their fingers scraping against the glass. The whispers grew louder, forming words she couldn't understand, like a chorus of voices from another time, mournful and menacing. Her dashboard lights flickered, her fuel gauge dropping faster than it should, the needle dipping into the red. She was sobbing now, her hands trembling, her voice breaking as she prayed for a way out, for the storm to clear, for the town to release her. Finally, the dust storm cleared, the air lightening, the road straightening. Lisa found herself back, on the highway, miles from where she'd started, the town nowhere in sight. Her GPS showed no record of Eden's Hollow, no map, no mention, nothing, as if it had never existed. She pulled into a truck stop, her hands still shaking, her face pale. She asked other truckers about the town, and most shook their heads, confused. But one old driver, his eyes dark with memory, spoke up, his voice low. "That place," he said, "it shows up sometimes out of nowhere, on roads that don't exist. People go in, but they don't always come out. You're one of the lucky ones." Lisa never took that route again, and she keeps a map in her cab now, one she checks by hand, never trusting her GPS. 2 more stories, and the chills are relentless, the shadows growing darker with every mile. If you're still here, you're a true horror fan, Hit that subscribe button and let's finish this journey together, deeper into the unknown. Story 9. The Screaming Bridge bridges are just part of the job for truckers. Cross one, keep moving, don't look back. But for Greg Foster, a 50-year-old trucker from Memphis, Tennessee, a bridge on County Road 17 in rural Kentucky became a gateway to terror. A place where the past refuses to stay buried, where the screams of the lost echo through the night. It was October 2018, and Greg was hauling lumber from Louisville to Lexington, a straightforward run on a road he'd driven for years. He'd heard the stories about the old bridge on County Road 17. Locals called it the Screaming Bridge, whispering tales of tragedy, of restless spirits trapped in the river below. Greg, a practical man with 20 years on the road, dismissed it as folklore, the kind of ghost story truckers tell over stale coffee at 3 a.m. But that night, as he approached the bridge, he learned the stories were real, and the screams were all too close. As Greg neared the bridge, his radio cut out, the classic rock fading into a low, buzzing static that made his ears ache. The air grew heavy, his headlights flickering as if struggling against the darkness, the mist rising from the river below. Then he heard it, a scream, so loud it shook the cab, raw and primal, like something being torn apart, its pain echoing through the night. It wasn't human, not entirely, and it sent a chill racing down Greg's spine, his hands tightening on the wheel. Greg slowed his rig, his heart pounding, his breath shallow. He thought maybe someone was hurt, trapped under the bridge or in the river below, their cries carried by the wind. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out, the scream echoing in his ears, growing louder, more desperate, as if it was coming from inside his skull. The bridge was old, its wooden planks creaking under his weight, the river below shrouded in mist, its surface black and still, like a mirror reflecting nothing. He called out, "Anyone there? You okay?" The only response was another scream, closer now, coming from the darkness beneath the bridge, raw and guttural. Greg's flashlight beam swept the area, revealing nothing but shadows and mist, the air thick with the smell of damp wood and something sharper, like blood. Then he saw them, handprints, dozens of them, pressed into the rusted railings, small and child-sized, glistening as if they'd been made moments ago. His stomach churned, his heart racing. He backed away, the screams growing louder, joined by whispers, children's voices calling his name, soft and mournful. Greg. Greg. The voices were faint but clear, echoing in the mist, surrounding him. Greg's hands shook as he stumbled back to his truck, the whispers following him, the screams echoing in his skull, growing louder, more insistent. As he crossed the bridge, his mirrors showed figures, small, pale, standing on the road behind him, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. They didn't move, just watched, their forms flickering like static, their presence heavy and oppressive. Greg floored it, the rig lurching forward, the bridge creaking beneath him, the screams chasing him into the night. Greg didn't stop until he was miles away, his hands shaking, his heart racing, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. When he pulled into a truck stop, he told his story to the locals, their faces grim, their eyes dark with recognition. The Screaming Bridge, they said, was where a school bus crashed in the 1960s, killing a dozen children, their bodies never recovered from the river below. Their screams still echo, their spirits searching for someone to save them, or drag them into the dark, to share their endless torment. Greg avoids that route now, but he says the whispers still follow him, calling his name in the quiet of the night, faint and mournful. One final story to go, and the terror is at its peak, the shadows closing in. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. Drop a comment. Would you cross that bridge alone at night? Let's finish this journey. One last plunge into the unknown. Story 10. The Man Who Wasn't. Our final story is the strangest, the most unsettling of all. A tale that defies explanation, that lingers like a cold breath on the back of your neck. For Anna Patel, a 32-year-old trucker from Fort Collins, Colorado, a routine run in 2023 became a mystery that still haunts her. A chilling encounter with a man who wasn't there, who shouldn't have been possible. It was January 2023, and Anna was hauling medical supplies, bandages, syringes, and IV bags through the Rocky Mountains, a route she'd driven dozens of times, her rig a familiar companion on these treacherous roads. It was a bitter winter night, the snow falling in thick sheets, the wind howling through the passes, shaking the truck with every gust. The road was slick, the curves sharp, but Anna was focused, her hands steady, her eyes scanning the road for black ice. Around 2 a.m., she saw him, a man standing in the middle of the road, waving his arms frantically, his figure barely visible through the swirling snow. Anna's heart skipped a beat, her hands tightening on the wheel. She slowed her rig, thinking he was a stranded motorist, maybe a hiker caught in the blizzard, desperate for help. She pulled over, the tires crunching in the snow, the engine idling with a low growl. She opened her door, the wind biting at her face, carrying a chill that seeped into her bones. "You okay?" she called, her voice nearly lost in the storm. "Need help? I can get you to the next town." The man didn't answer. He just walked toward her, his movements slow, almost mechanical, his head tilted slightly, his eyes glinting in the dark. As he got closer, Anna's stomach twisted, a knot of dread forming in her chest. His face was wrong, too smooth, too perfect, like a mannequin's, with no lines, no imperfections. His eyes were empty, reflecting the snow like polished mirrors, unblinking, unseeing. His coat was old, torn, but there was no frost on it, no snow clinging to his hair or shoulders, as if the storm didn't touch him. Anna slammed the door shut, her hands trembling, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She locked the door, her eyes never leaving him. He stood there, inches from the window, staring, not blinking, not moving. His presence heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing on her chest. Anna's CB was dead, the static thick and buzzing, her phone showing no signal, the screen flickering. She tried the engine, but it wouldn't turn over, the starter clicking uselessly, the cab growing colder, her breath frosting the windows. The man raised his hand, pressing it against the glass, his fingers leaving no mark in the frost, his lips moving as if speaking. But no sound came out. Just that eerie hum, growing louder, vibrating through the cab, shaking the metal. Then, he was gone. No footsteps, no trace. Just gone. As if he'd never been there. The snow undisturbed where he'd stood. The engine roared to life, the headlights flaring, cutting through the storm. Anna floored it, the rig lurching through the snow, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. She drove for hours, not stopping, not slowing, until she reached a truck stop, her face pale, her eyes wild with fear. When she checked her dash cam, the footage showed the road, empty, pristine, with no sign of the man, just snow and darkness. Anna sat in the truck stop diner, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink, her eyes fixed on the dash cam footage looping on her phone. The screen showed nothing. No man, no figure, just the endless snow and the dark ribbon of the highway. But she knew what she'd seen, felt the weight of those empty, mirrored eyes staring into her soul, the hum that vibrated through her bones like a warning from another world. She replayed the footage again and again, searching for a glimpse of him, a shadow, anything to prove she wasn't losing her mind. The truck stop was nearly empty, the only sounds the clink of dishes and the low murmur of a late-night radio playing country tunes. Anna's hands shook as she told her story to the waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading, Darlene. Darlene listened in silence, her face unreadable. But when Anna finished, she leaned in, her voice low. "You're not the first," she said. "That stretch of road, it's got a history. Drivers see things up there, people who ain't there, who vanish like smoke. Some call him the snowman, a ghost from a wreck back in the 80s, a driver who froze to death waiting for help that never came." Anna's blood ran cold. She remembered the man's coat, tattered and old, the way the snow didn't touch him, as if he existed outside the storm. Darlene poured her another coffee, her hands steady but her eyes dark with memory. "He don't hurt you," she said. "Not usually. But he watches, and once he's seen you, he don't forget. You'll feel him, out there in the dark, waiting." Anna didn't want to believe it, but the weight of those words settled over her like a shroud, heavy and inescapable. Anna drove on, finishing her run, but the memory of the man clung to her, a shadow in her mind. For weeks she felt him, those empty eyes watching from the edges of her vision, the faint hum echoing in quiet moments, like a signal from somewhere beyond. She checked her mirrors obsessively, expecting to see him standing on the road behind her, his silhouette flickering in the snow. At night, she dreamed of him, standing outside her window, his hand pressed against the glass, his lips moving in silent words she couldn't understand. She told her story to other truckers, hoping for answers, for someone to tell her it was just exhaustion, just the storm playing tricks. But the older drivers nodded knowingly, their faces grim. They'd seen him too, or heard of him, a man who appears out of nowhere, waving for help, then vanishes without a trace. Some say he's a ghost, the spirit of that lost driver, forever searching for rescue. Others believe he's something else, something older, a presence that haunts the mountains, drawn to the loneliness of the road, feeding on the fear of those who see him. Anna still drives, but she avoids the Rockies in winter, taking longer routes to steer clear of that cursed pass. She keeps a journal now, writing down every detail of that night, hoping to make sense of it, to keep the memory from consuming her. On quiet nights, when the road is dark and the world is still, she swears she can still feel him, those mirrored, eyes watching, the hum vibrating faintly, like a signal that never stops. She checks her dashcam footage one last time, and though it shows nothing, she knows he was there, and somewhere, out in the snow, he's waiting for her to return. And with that, we've reached the end of our 10 terrifying tales. But the road doesn't let go so easily. Let's take a moment to reflect before we leave the darkness behind. That's it, thrill seekers. 10 scary true trucker horror stories, a long journey into the heart of terror, where the open road reveals its darkest secrets. From the phantom hitchhiker of Route 66, luring drivers into her endless night, to the whispering CB radio, broadcasting pleas from beyond the grave. From the red eyes in the fog, stalking through the mist, to the ghostly convoy, forever bound to the desert's sands. From the woman in the rearview mirror, her hollow eyes watching, to the haunted rest stop, where screams echo in the dark. From the shadow in the trailer, a presence that clings like a curse, to the vanishing town, a place that shouldn't exist. From the screaming bridge, where lost children call out, to the man who wasn't there, a ghost in the snow. These stories remind us that the highway is more than asphalt and steel. It's a place of mystery, of fear, of things that watch from just beyond the light. These tales aren't just stories. They're warnings, carved into the memories of those who survived, passed down like ghost stories around a campfire. They tell us that the road is alive, that it remembers, that it watches. Every mile holds a secret, every shadow a story, and every driver a chance to meet the unknown. Maybe you felt it too. A chill on a lonely stretch, a flicker in your mirrors, a voice on the radio that shouldn't be there. The road doesn't care if you believe. It's waiting, always waiting, for the next soul to wander into its grasp. If you've survived this journey, you're braver than most. Hit that like button to let me know you made it through. And if you're new here, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our community of horror fans. We're always diving into the dark, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Share this video with someone who loves a good scare, someone who'd brave the road with you. And don't forget to drop your own spooky stories in the comments below. Have you seen something on the highway that you can't explain? A shadow, a voice, a figure that vanished? I'm reading every single one, and your tale might just inspire our next video. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road, your doors locked, and your headlights bright. Because out there in the dark, something's watching, waiting for you to take that next turn. Drive safe, and I'll see you on the other side.